Hi there, it's Anna Rosie Duck Designs here. Thanks ever so much for joining me today. I'm back finally to share with you how to make this card from the Country Lane suite. Now it does seem like it's been ages since I last said that I would share this with you. I have to be honest, I got a bit sidetracked with my on-stage swaps that I did, but I'm pleased to say that the chocolate bar boxes that I shared with you on my last video did go down well on stage, as did my decorated pizza boxes. And I also came back with a whole box full of beautiful swaps from other demonstrators. If you're wondering what on stage is all about, then I've written a couple of blog posts about it, and I'll put the links to that on the front of this video so you can have a look and see what goes on. So let's get back to some crafting. I don't know about you, that most of the time I can come up with ideas for cards, but sometimes, especially when you need a card, the inspiration's just not there. And really this is what all the illustrations in the catalogue are useful for. We're encouraged to use them to get ideas from them. So that's what I've done with this card. I've actually taken this design from the Stampin' Up catalogue, got on stage on the brain here. So the Stampin' Up catalogue, the autumn winter catalogue that is covering this Country Lane suite, I've taken that as my inspiration for this card. So that was the front of it, that's the inside. Now I'm going to make a very similar card to this, but I'm just going to mix the colours up a little bit so we're not making the same thing. Now the colours that are featured within this suite, within the designer series paper, include Blackberry Bliss, which is one of the new colours and which is, I have to say, one of my favourites. So instead of a white base, as I've done on this card, I'm going to use this as my base card. As usual, I've cut this at 8 by 6. I've scored at 4 to then give my card base. I'm going to get this out of the way. The other colours that I'm going to be using are Crushed Curry and also Old Olive. Again, they're featured in the designer series paper. I'm going to get that out of the way. And my front piece is going to be the smaller of the two. Now I've done that at 3.5 by 5.5. I made it slightly bigger on that one because it merged better with the white. I'm trying to make the fact that I've got this Blackberry Bliss as my base a bit more prominent on this one. And as you can see, I've used a different designer series paper as my base, or as my second layer. That's the back of that one. So what I'm going to do next, I'm taking this other piece of designer series paper, and I've done that at, or cut that at 3 by 5. As you can see, these are picking up the colours of Crushed Curry and Old Olive. Try and pick up on mine, which I think it's that way up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick that to this bit first, using snail. At this point it doesn't matter which way around I stick it, but it will when I get it to the base card. So I'm just centralising that. Once again, the light is absolutely rubbish today, but yeah, that is the right way up. So the next thing I'm going to do, if you notice on this one, there's a nice bow here, and that's been made out of the braided linen trim. Now, I love bows on cards. Unfortunately, I'm not a person who is very good at making bows. Mine always look absolutely rubbish, so hence I've gone for this idea of just wrapping it round. But if you're good at bows, you could always just tie your bow and then add it down here in the corner, like in the illustration in the catalogue. to do that way, I'm taking a piece of double-sided tape, and I'm not going to use my craft scissors to cut that like I normally do, and then I get glue all over the edges of it. So still getting confused which way up this is. It's definitely that way. So I want it about there on the card, so I'm going to stick my double-sided tape there. I want this to go round twice. I want a bit of extra just to play with. Better to have too much than not enough, as we wreck the card on the craft table. I'm on form as usual today. So taking the backing off of the double-sided tape, starting with the first piece, I'm just going to stick that down. Now I want a straight line. You're realising I'm doing this mid-air and you're not getting this on camera, but I want this to go straight across, end out the way, and then I'm going to be coming back across there, not too tight so you've got this adjustment so that you're happy with it. It's slightly closer, I think. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. I think I'm going to actually come down slightly. This is a good thing with the double-sided tape because it's holding it in place, but at this point you're not totally sticking it down. Okay, I think that's slightly better. I'm just looking at the angle of that one, and I think by the time I get this bit on, it's better just a bit lower. This is one of those paint drying moments, isn't it? But in some ways it's good to include that because it's all very well seeing cards at their finished point, but it's also good to see how we all struggle to get them there. Right, so I'm going to just cut off the surplus bits of the cord. I'm well stuck to the double-sided tape. There we go. Now that of course looks a mess, but we're not going to see that bit. So I'm going to now on my snail, and I'm going to stick that now onto my base card. I'll put that one out of the way. Now I'm going to put a really good amount of snail on here because I really want to stick this bit down, and just to make sure it sticks, I'm just going to add a small piece of double-sided tape over that piece of cord just to hold it into place. Now I'm going to stick that on the front of the card. Trying to centralise it as best I can. Yep, that's good. Right, so that's the start of the front of the card. Now this slightly bulging bit here is going to be covered up with your sentiment, so don't worry about that. The next thing I want to do is the inside of the card. I think this is a matching piece of the designer series paper, and that has been cut at 3 3/4 and 5 3/4. Put that in the middle using the snail. So there's a lot less of a border on this piece of the paper, because obviously you need as much of the inside of the card to write your message on. Now this is my inside piece of Whisper White, and that is at 3.5 and 5.5. Before I stick that down, I'm going to stamp it, and this is, as I say, the Country Home stamp set. It's a photopolymer stamp set, and I'm going with this one, and I'm going to stamp it in Blackberry Bliss. Now, as I've done on this card here, I'm not going to do the complete stamp. I'm just going to do a corner of the inside of the card. You see that that is actually, that stamp is picking up this design on the designer series paper. Now I've got ink over there. That's not very good, is it? Perhaps we could just stop for a moment. I'll cut another bit of Whisper White.